So it turns out Sony has decided for us that we'll actually own nothing and be happy, and that sucks. That's it. There's not really much else to say about it. You disagree? Please leave. And I feel all sorts of bad feelings about it, like anger, disappointment, anger, denial, anger, because god damn it, Sony Games have held my hand through the harshest, loneliest afternoons of my spoiled childhood. Well, as someone who loves to make silly things and have absolutely no one care about them, the best way I had to say something on this topic was to make a game, I guess. It just so happens the GameMaker's Toolkit Game Jam 2026 was right around the corner when the news broke. Last year's edition was the first time I ever joined a jam solo, and I've made a ton of progress since then. Like, please tell me this is progress. This is progress, right? Like, please tell me you're proud of me. I had this silly idea about a game where you would try to save physical games before it was too late, with a full economy system and all that. I wasn't really feeling the theme at first, and so I spent a bunch of time trying to figure out whether I even wanted to join the jam. On Saturday night at 6 p.m, exactly 24 hours before the Sunday deadline, I said to myself, you cannot do a game like that in 24 hours. And naturally, I then said, F it, let's do it anyway. My friend, new or old, it's so lovely to have you here. Kick back and relax because this will be a bit of a wild ride with a surprise ending that even I couldn't see coming. I'm Anthony O'Wolf, but you can call me Ant. Welcome to the Indie Diarist. From experience, all bad ideas start with an over-engineered brainstorming, so I fired up a Miro board and started jotting down some thoughts. I had zero expectations, and quite frankly, I was also ready to drop the project if I didn't get to a decent idea within an hour, say. I tried a bunch of different directions, but the idea about game preservation kept coming back to me. Eventually, I landed on something that seemed to have legs, going from store to store in a little car, buying physical games to save them from oblivion. I think there's a whole lot of directions in which this game could have gone instead. Like, for example, maybe you had to earn a salary to afford games at your local game store somehow. But eventually, the idea of driving around in a silly car with top-down perspective felt really fun to me. So, sounds like I had an idea. Except just driving around and pressing E to interact with random stores, that didn't feel like the definition of fun, you know? If you don't know me, my background is as a writer, and I've done plenty of very small story games over the years. And the result of those is that usually I do not really prioritize gameplay, but this time I wanted to do something different. I want to grow as a game designer. So this time, I really wanted to challenge myself to do something fun first, then think about the story later. Although I kind of had a story, but that's... So the player needed a way to make some money, so I landed on a simple economy system. Given a list of wanted and unwanted games, you could flip the games you didn't want at certain stores to be able to afford your wish list from elsewhere, or from the same store, depends. So maybe someone else will save the ones you flip, who knows, but that's not your problem as the player. And all this while a clock is constantly ticking months and years in the background. If it reaches January 2028, bit of a... Before you can save enough games, you lose. Of course, my stupid mind came up with a bunch of other features I immediately had to cut to avoid scope creep. For example, health points for the card, digital propaganda signs, or corporate fans you could smash to gain some extra time. Damn it, I still think that could be pretty fun to implement. And even random timer events. But in the end, I decided to scrap everything and keep only the simple economy system. I had only 24 hours after all. And even then, the simple economy system, believe me, that was probably beyond scope for a 24-hour game. But the problem was, I had never designed an economy system before. So I was in for the most intense 24 hours of my entire life. In my first GameMaker's Toolkit Jam video from last year, a very kind user rightly said, I may have overplanned a tiny bit for a jam as short as that. And they were 100% right. So naturally I learned absolutely nothing and decided to plan even harder. Okay, I admit, I restrained myself a little bit this time. All I really needed was a checklist, but also some sort of way to keep track of things. I simplified my usual system and ended up with a very straightforward list of to-dos split into categories. To begin with, I had to do some art. Knowing myself, that alone would give me the kick I needed to keep going. Because disgracefully, I don't worship caffeine. And my own self-drive was the only thing I could rely on to keep going with a sleep-deprived brain. Sadly, I didn't think of filming myself while doing all of this crap, so what follows and what you'll see from now are just very creative reconstructions of what actually happened. I started with Blender. Cute car. Great. What if I do 5 cars of different colors? I need to make the buildings as well. What about the roads? And they will need intersections. So, yeah. It got a little bit out of hand really fast. But hey, bright side, now I have a road kit that I made and I can reuse for other games. So, win, I guess? With the art done, I started laying out the city. I wanted the player to have at least 5 to 6 stores they could travel between, so the map had to be fairly big. By then, though, it was probably about 9 p.m. and I didn't want to sleep too late. I was going to need lucidity for the next day. It was deadline day. Yeah, who am I kidding? I guess you know me by now. I jumped straight into a coding sprint in my beloved Godot and went to bed at 4 a.m. anyway. On the bright side, I did get a shit ton of stuff done. For example, player car and camera movement, vector-based acceleration, knockback, which was a pain, camera shake, initial city layout to drive around, traffic system based on set path 3D nodes, the countdown timer, and even the trade graph I would then use for the economy system. So they were very productive hours. Of these, though, I think the knockback effect and the trade graph were probably the most interesting. So one kept catapulting me into the cars I was sitting instead of away from them. And when I actually got it working, I said, what the hell, I'll just go all in with the rotation and make it the funniest car knockback you'll see today. I wanted this game to be silly, so get ready for this. This Looney Tunes-like effect is still my proudest achievement from this year, and I dare you to convince me otherwise. Well, to be fair, the bar is 6 feet under, so... But the trade graph. The trade graph was something. I made a simple spreadsheet with store names and a list of available stock for each, and whatever junk the player could flip for a few bucks to afford the games they actually wanted. It was quite confusing, and if you look at the spreadsheet now, I mean, yes, that was the same reaction I had when I finished it, but I didn't really have the time to turn it into a visual fancy graph, so yeah, this was gonna have to do. Once this abomination was done, it was finally time for some short, but very panicky sleep. I'm not gonna lie, I think I started day 2 in a pretty good place, but my brain was really starting to give up by then. So progress was so slow. I wanted a very colorful store UI, and God bless Godot's theme system because making it was so easy with it. But I also had to wire up all the economy, and for that I used custom resources to pass data around. You may think I was overcomplicating things, and you may be right, but if I can't hold myself to good standards with a silly little project, how am I expected to do it with big commercial ones? He says, lying to himself. Well, who knows? Maybe I would have had more bugs with a looser architecture. I don't know. I'd love to hear your opinion on that, so maybe leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Anyway, at this point, the game was actually coming together. And by then, I was starting to think I could actually do this. Driving around was super fun, the UI felt super cute, and the color palette was super saturated, so it felt like I was, I don't know, I felt like I was a kid again, playing with like a toy car or something like that. Then, a couple of hours before the deadline, I decided to cut the city in half. It was a tough decision, but with the deadline looming and the time ticking, I really didn't have a lot of time to get creative with the layout, so I feel like it was the best choice there. And the grid was very obviously fighting against me when I was placing roads around and buildings. It was just a nightmare. Speaking of buildings, those assholes kept getting in the way, so I added a little raycast to hide anything the camera touched on the way to the player. It was a little poppy in the end, but it worked like a charm. You can actually see the car when you're just driving between buildings. With only 2 hours left at 4 p.m., it was time for the final rush. I added sounds, music, fixed all the bugs I could, refined the car paths, and play tested the entire thing to ensure you couldn't get yourself soft-locked by selling games in the wrong order. Eventually, I had enough money in circulation that players would always have a way to buy stock and replenish their finances, provided they weren't just buying the games they needed. Some labels helped me make clear that reselling was actually an option and something that they would want to do, maybe. And then finally, at 5 p.m., 1 hour before the deadline, I had a build. I exported everything as quickly as I could with 15 minutes to spare, then used the Jam's surprise extension hour until 7 PM to fix a few more bugs and tidy the itch page. But I'd done it! I made a game in 24 hours. I couldn't believe it myself. It felt amazing. Then at 6:59, I realized that I hadn't submitted the project to the Jam and I missed the deadline by 5 seconds. That was actually pretty good. I liked it. Hello, my friends. This is Ant speaking to you from a smoldering hot UK. There's about 30 degrees here right now. Thank you so much for watching. And yes, I did miss the deadline by about 5 seconds. It felt really crap. I felt like I had wasted a bunch of time, but now I feel a little better about it. I feel like, okay, I've done a game in 24 hours completely by myself. That would have been unthinkable a year or 2 years ago, especially 2 years ago. So I was very proud of it in the end, and I'm still very proud of it now. It was a bit of a bummer that not a lot of people played it, but you know, if you do want to play it yourself, you'll find a link to the itch page in the description. You can also find links to my Patreon page if you want to support me in any way. There's a lot of stuff that I do. But the easiest thing, if you really enjoyed this video and you want to see more like this, you can just leave a like or subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot as I'm trying to grow. In the spirit of that, I'm going to leave you a little video that you can watch if you're interested in watching more. But other than that, I'll speak to you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.